speaking of the law not being very good at serving justice recently, we've got Ferguson to talk about.
Well, give me a little rundown here of what you know. Let's get a base out here.
Well, you know, reddit.com/r/explain like I'm 5.
Yeah.
They've got a thread, explain like I'm 5, Ferguson 2.0. It was posted 6 days ago.
Fantastic. We'll use that.
One of the posts here, can anyone make a TLDR version of this? Well, yes. Yes, we can. This is Upvoter222 has posted this. I'll read it out. Michael Brown, a black 18-year-old, was walking in the middle of the street and ordered to move to the sidewalk by Darren Wilson, a white police officer. Some sort of fight broke out between the two and Wilson ended up shooting Brown, killing him. Some people contend that Brown had his hands harmlessly in the air and was chased by the police officer. Others contend that Brown tried to grab Wilson's gun, prompting him to shoot in self-defense. Brown did not have a weapon on him. The incident became associated with unfair treatment of blacks at the hands of police, leading to protests. Unfortunately, things got out of control with riots, vandalism and looting. The Ferguson police responded to the unrest with a militarized approach. They were in tank-like vehicles and armed with lots of weapons. A few days after the original incident, a video was released showing Brown stealing from a convenience store and pushing a store employee. This video damaged Brown's image as an innocent, harmless victim in the eyes of the public. Fast forward to more recent events, and there was the matter of whether Wilson should be brought to court for the shooting. A grand jury heard from the prosecutor, who took an unusually aggressive approach and decided not to indict Wilson, and that's where we are today. And that's it. So that's up to speed, pretty much, on the situation.
This basically is just a case of sort of police brutality and police especially in America, sort of using force very, very liberally.
Yeah, yeah.
With absolutely no recourse whatsoever.
Have you ever watched Russell Brand's YouTube series, The Trews?
I haven't, but it's meant to be interesting.
Well, I've been watching it. It's quite good. He did an episode on Ferguson, and he brought up some pretty good points on that. He talked about how the media spins it in such a way that they tried to make Darren Wilson out to be the victim. They showed photos of his neck and his face and stuff, saying, here are the injuries that Wilson sustained during the attack, and you can't see anything, and it's just pathetic.
Yeah.
And Russell Brand's whole thing is, you know, that we need a revolution, and that the military-industrial complex and corporations in general have too much power. And in the Ferguson video, he talks about how, you know, the NRA is way too powerful, has too much lobbying power, is more powerful than democracy and all that shit. And he argues that we have a responsibility to reframe the information. I've touched on some quotes. And he also says it's irrelevant whether people are looting or not. He thinks that the important point is that police brutality happens. And he brought out a pretty shocking statistic, which is that every 28 hours an unarmed black person is shot by a police officer in America.
Every 28 hours?
Yeah.
Jesus.
So one a day, pretty much.
I think the issue here is people aren't separating the incidents in of themselves. Yes, they're all connected to a certain extent, but looting, we can look at looting from our middle-class suburbs and go, that is fucking, look at these black people, that is awful, that is terrible. Yeah. But also, let's not forget where these people are. They're in a massively deprived area of America.
Yeah.
In which, you know, violence and crime is a huge, huge thing. And this is just something that's, you know, the straw that's broke the camel's back, really.
Yeah.
When you live in nothing, we can sit here, we live a great life, really. We're doing this just for a jolly. Yeah. But we haven't got any money, you can't get by, there's no jobs, everything's closing down, the economy's really fucking you.
And there's no reason for it to be that case.
Yeah.
Like, there's no reason that they should be that poor and that disenfranchised.
In the most powerful country in the world.
Yeah, and then there are people living in that country as well who are richer than anyone in the world. Like, the divide between the rich and the poor in America is huge.
It's that whole 1% thing, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And it's true. I mean, you know, the people with the power are the people with the money. Like, that's the American government ultimately answers to capitalism and to the people with power. Like, people bang on about the military-industrial complex and you know, for a while that was the connotation there was like crazy conspiracy theorists and stuff like that, but it's become pretty undeniable.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely.
He was in this Russell Brand video, by the way. Do you want to hear a little clip? Because he talks about the militarization of the police forces and stuff like that.
Yes.
It's pretty interesting.
Since 2006, state and local enforcement have acquired at least 435 armoured vehicles, 533 military aircraft and 93,763 machine guns. Well, it seems to me like they're anticipating aggravation. 4.3 billion worth of military gear has been transferred since this militarisation programme began in 1997. It's almost like they know that the laws are unjust, that people have no recourse within the law, so eventually will rise up and protest, and they are ready for that. They know that change is coming, they know that people are unifying, and they're not going to yield to it. Power never yields. It never yields. You don't get any concession, you don't get anything without protest. It's literally the only option. You've got these options: shut up or protest.
I thought that was a pretty enlightening point, really. Like the fact that, what was it, $4.3 billion have been spent on the militarization of the American police forces since 1997.
That is a huge amount of money.
Yeah, and you can argue whatever you want. I mean, Russell Brand's argument is that that's in anticipation of protest, like any sort of protest.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know, that seems like it's probably correct. Like 93,000 machine guns being distributed between police forces is a lot. And when it comes to unlawful, or not necessarily unlawful, but what the public perceives as miscarriages of justice, like this Michael Brown thing, of course rioting is going to happen. And so we're seeing that the police forces are ready for that by, you know, having tanks and machine guns and helicopters and shit like that.
Well, that's the thing. This is probably one of the big things that's wrong with our society, is that when a law is passed, when a decision is made, that's it then. There's no opportunity for those the law will now affect, and for the decision that is now affecting however many people, for them to recourse and discuss and say, well, what about this, what about that, what about X, Y, and Z?
Yeah.
We say, but then to claim we're not living in a democracy, people will accuse you of being, you know, an anarchist, a communist, whatever it is. I'm not a politician. I don't know anything about politics really whatsoever. But the problem is this democracy doesn't work. Quite obviously, doesn't work. Where you want to put the blame for that, whether you want to put it on the big business and the lobbying power that they have in every single country with any amount of vote, whether you want to put it on veto power that countries have within the United Nations, whether you want to put it on X, Y, or Z, you know, oil, money, and capitalism.
I think it's ideology fundamentally. It's a problem in the way we think. We're a capitalist. We've got a capitalist ideology, and capitalist comes from the Latin for head. We're like an egocentric ideology. We've got big heads, and we want to make loads of money no matter what. And there are all sorts of examples of this, just basically fucking over the common person, and particularly poor people. And I think people are becoming aware of that now.
I think it's going to get to a point, and as we can see by this, it is. It's got to the point where people are so aggravated and are seeing so little change and so little help, and then the media and these people in power having, you know, basically the balls to blame them for X, Y, and Z, to blame them for the ever-growing crime rates, to blame them for the lack of jobs, the lack of employment, etc.
Yeah.
That people are going to snap. And we've seen it in the past slightly. You know, it happened with Zimmerman a little bit in America.
Yeah.
It happens with, you know, student loans over here all the time, which isn't really a big thing, but
it's not as big, yeah.
But the more it happens, the more likely it is to happen.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, like once the precedent has been set, it's more likely to happen again.
Happen again and again and again.
Yeah.
And I don't know how I feel on that, to be honest. I don't know if we should be taking to the streets and demonstrating every little thing that's wrong with society, because where does that end, if you know what I mean?
The goal is that it ends in a better society, surely.
Sorry, I was lighting a cigarette. But
That's okay. I thought you were just like, well, that's a good point.
No, yeah. And as long as a majority, especially in a community like this, that's where you need much, much smaller government. And it's quite I suppose, a libertarian argument they would say over there. Big government is ruining things because of the lack of subjectivity within it. And this is a prime example of that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, people are not happy about this either. Like, this isn't just... I think the people who agree with the decision of the court are in a very small minority. It seems like most people are pretty against it. Like the Twitter reaction, the Tumblr reaction, it's all been pretty much outrage.
Well, the thing is, he got acquitted.
Yeah.
And he is not going to be indicted on any charges by a grand jury that contained 12 people, 3 of whom were African American people, shall we say, and he got a majority 9-12 vote, and all of those were white.
Really? Is that what happened?
And that's not been discussed massively. But when the shoe was on the other foot, I don't remember because I was very, very young. But when O.J. Simpson, I don't know if you know O.J. Simpson.
Yeah.
He was a famous footballer. He pretty much admitted stabbing his wife to death.
Yeah.
And is now in prison on different charges. But he got acquitted by a majority black jury. And ever since then, that's been brought up again and again and again and again and again. Whereas in all this chatter, I've not heard much about this. The fact that the grand jury was not basically not biased.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I could talk about this without any expertise for days, but I think it's interesting to see how many prominent black people have talked about this. So I might read out some of their tweets. You've got Magic Johnson.
Yeah.
He's weighed in. He says, "I'm very disappointed with the decision in the Mike Brown case in Ferguson. We must work together to stop the unnecessary loss of young men of colour. Justice was not served in Ferguson." Kobe Bryant, he says, "The system enables young black men to be killed behind the mask of law. #tipping point, #change." I don't know why they've included him in this list, but Ricky Stenhouse Jr., who's just a white guy, I think he's a NASCAR racer or something like that, he says, "I understand people being upset, but use it positively to help each other. We'll never understand destroying the place you call home." And it's interesting that the only person who, on this list anyway, the only person who has sort of talked out against the looting is the white person, and he said that he doesn't understand. He said, "I will never understand destroying the place you call home." And I think really we have a responsibility to try to understand that, because by destroying their own home, clearly that's a desperate call for help.
Oh, yeah.
I think they are going about it the wrong way, really. Like, violence isn't the answer, but, you know, this massive amounts of unrest, like, it doesn't happen for no reason. They're not just being crazy. They're saying, pay attention to this. This is something that you need to... Everyone has a responsibility to help us out, because we're in dire straits here.
It's quite obvious that in America, minorities, and the biggest minority within America are African American black people. They feel unhappy at their very core. They're unhappy people. And I'm not saying black people are unhappy. That could be the soundbite you take away and slap on
I understand
the Daily Mail. But
not in terms of their everyday emotion, but
something like this, it brings such unhappiness and outrage, rightly so, and that is a core problem in society, that such a vast majority are feeling like they're being treated differently, being treated without equality, and acting out is basically saying something, i.e. the whole system, needs to change massively.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see this in sort of comparison to when Obama was elected, because I feel that was, looking back at it in hindsight, that was in 2008, I was a lot younger than I am now. To look at it in hindsight, I feel like that whole change campaign, that's what people were talking about. People wanted the change to bring full and rightful equality to that country, and it's not happened.
No, it turns out that Obama is sort of a token black guy.
Well,
in a lot of ways.
That's, again, I don't want to hype on the politics and the democratic system's broken, but that's a big problem.
It's just that it so clearly is broken.
that's a huge problem with the system, is the fact that the man in charge really has little to no say in what happens.
Yeah.
He's just the bloke who blunts it all. He's just the face.
I mean, yeah, he's the face. He clearly has very little power, because every single one of his positions that he's talked passionately about in the past has either not come to fruition or something completely the opposite has happened. Like, he talked years and years ago, he talks about how strongly he believes in not prosecuting whistleblowers. And then look at all the NSA shit and Edward Snowden and Manning and like... Clearly he doesn't have much power.
Another thing he spoke about many, many years before he was even thinking of standing for Prime Minister, President, was the embargo with Cuba, and how, he thinks it's outdated and ridiculous.
Right.
And
but that's still on.
Every year, it has to be signed every year, every single year. And every year since he's come in, it's been signed again. With no, he's not bringing it up, nobody's talking about it, it's just signed.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think he should have absolute power by any means, but he should at least have a degree of... He should have a say, he's the leader, ostensibly. I mean, clearly that's debatable, but...
With this system, you either have to say, this is... Because he's the figure of the party, and you either have to say, hi there, I'm the figure of the party, but this isn't me, I'm just standing for a party. And basically what you're going to get is a mini democracy of people who have power. They're in Senate, or they're in the House of Lords, or the MPs, or whatever it is, wherever you are.
Yeah.
It's only democracy within a certain amount of people. I can't go to my local MP, I can't go to the Prime Minister and say, X about, I think this law should be changed for X reason, and get it put to, referendum or this or that. Because that's not how it works. It's not in the... No. That's not how any party will act. And as soon as you have power, you act to maintain that power and keep that power. And that's something that's wrong. It's not a bettering of society. It's keeping yourself at the top of society.
Yeah, and it's profit as well.
And that's not democratic. And we can say it's democracy because we all have a vote, but we all have a shit vote.
Yeah.
If the only 3 ice creams available were, vegetable, water flavour and soil flavour, you'd be like, well, you can choose any of the 3 ice creams. We're giving you 3 different ice creams to pick from.
Yeah.
That sounds great.
One of these ice creams.
But the choice is shit. And that's how I feel. I'm not sitting here saying I know anything about politics, because honestly I feel massively disillusioned by it.
Yes, I'm the same, yeah.
But that's the problem in of itself. To me, the parties to a certain extent are the same.
Yeah.
They're all the same. They're cogs in a broken wheel sort of thing. And I have no interest in being a part of the system.
I brought up, I showed you the clip of Russell Brand earlier on his show, The Trews. He had Scroobius Pip on a while ago.
He was on Scroobius Pip's podcast the other week.
Yeah. Did you listen to it?
Very interesting, yeah.
Yeah, it was very interesting. I recommend that. But anyway, Scroobius Pip was on the Trews, and they were watching clips of something to do with the House of Lords, and Pip brought up how it's so telling that the news anchors who were talking about it were worried that some people from Labour might go over to the Tory party, and how that betrays the fact that these people don't really have different ideologies at all. They all believe the same things, and it's just like the colour of their tie is different.
Yeah, that's it.
But essentially that's a superficial difference. They want the same things, they believe the same things, they benefit from the same things.
I feel that we don't really live in a democracy. We live...
Yeah, I agree, yeah.
But to say we don't live in a democracy, or I feel the system's broken, is saying people will assume you think, I don't believe in democracy, which is not true at all. I do believe in democracy, of course I do. But
it's just you don't believe this is a democracy.
I don't believe... Well, that you can class this as a democracy because it ticks all the boxes that it's defined as a democracy, but it's a broken form of democracy where we give more power to more people. We give more power to a fewer amount of people.
Yeah. There exists an elite which shouldn't exist.
In the same way, if you say dictator, you immediately get negative connotations.
Yeah.
You think negative. But, that might not be the case. Of course, it's that's never going to happen. You're never going to get a dictator that's probably great. It's always probably going to end terribly.
I mean, the sort of person who wants to become a dictator is probably... And who is capable of becoming a dictator is likely to be, a bad dude. Like, I've seen all sorts of statistics about how, like, 90% of CEOs are psychopaths. And it just shows that in order to get to the top of that...
Of this society we live in.
Yeah.
To get to the top, the actual top, where you have actual power, and that isn't even being a part of the the political sphere, really. You can be Prime Minister, you can be Dave Cameron, you can be Barack Obama, but
you're not Rupert Murdoch.
Yeah, but you have no real say here.
Yeah.
If Rupert Murdoch changes his mind overnight, then 80% of American media changes its mind overnight.
Yeah.
And that's a huge sphere of influence. A massive sphere of influence.
Have you ever watched any Fox News reports on YouTube or anything like that?
I've seen clips here and there.
It's so very it's so very obvious that it's propaganda. Like, the attempt to hide it is very minimal. It's really on the nose. It's really, really obvious.
It's that sort of propaganda that they're very happy being propaganda. They're like, we're propaganda. The people that watch us are going to accept it. The people that don't. To the fact where in America you have the Daily Show that's been running for nearly 20 years. You have the Colbert Report, which is sort of satirization of those political anchors of Fox News and CNN and this and that.
Yeah.
And the fact that they go, look how ridiculous this is. But they still have a huge sphere of influence, and that in of itself is the problem. If you have that in any other part of society, to the point where a vast majority of the society is sort of laughing at it, going, isn't this stupid, let's make a funny television show about it. And don't get me wrong, I love the Daily Show, Colbert Report's hilarious, but this isn't doing anything about it. It's feeding into its own audience, going, yeah, all the things you thought were terrible, they are terrible. But
yeah, I feel as though things like the Daily Show, they're the precursor to change. They're not going to cause change directly, but they're at least going to alert people to the fact that it's broken.
Honestly, they shouldn't. I'm not saying that they should. Everything should be about change. They're entertainment programs, and the point of those programs is to entertain, and that's what they do, and that's why they're so successful. But a lot of people just see it as what it is and go, oh yeah, that's good, and they don't really take anything from it. The fact that the vast majority are happy living how we're living sort of, I think, says it all.
I'm going to ask you a big question now. What do you think needs to happen? What do you think needs to happen to affect the change that we need in our culture, in our society?
God. Yeah, that is a huge question.
It's a big one, isn't it?
And people spend their entire lives talking about this and discussing this.
Yeah.
You look at someone like Noam Chomsky, guy's like about 112.
Yeah, and he's still trying to figure it out.
For 85 years he's been trying to figure it out and saying this and that and changing his mind and saying, very important things, but getting nowhere.
Yeah.
And now we have it, especially in this country. Russell Brand is suddenly become a figurehead almost, and it's weird, and I'm not sure how I feel about it. I agree with some of the stuff he's saying. I disagree with some of the stuff he's saying. But I feel like he's not the man for the job. I feel it's great.
Well,
I feel it's great he's getting this information out there.
When this whole revolution thing first came about, I was really cynical about it and thought, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's being so vague and stuff like that. But I started watching his Trews videos on YouTube, and he makes some really salient points that other people just aren't making, and I think that's what people are attracted to. Also, he's famous. People are familiar with him.
He's a good. I don't even know if figurehead is the right word. He's a good person to be saying these things because, like you say, he's very well known. He's very famous. He brings a lot of eyes to a message that needs to be said. A lot of the stuff he's saying is very good and very well thought out, and he's to a certain extent well read, and he articulates understandably. I think is the most important part of the way he approaches things, in the fact that he speaks to you like a bloke in the pub would speak to you in a certain way, in a sort of upper class pub, in a sort of sit down pub, rather than the Nag's Head on a Friday night. But he sort of cuts through some of the bullshit.
He's relatable.
Yeah, he is to a certain extent relatable.
Yeah.
And the fact he has an interesting backstory, helps.
Yeah. It's funny how the media is so negative on Russell Brand. They really slam him. Like Fox News has slammed him to no end, and then he will do a video deconstructing the slam and
yeah, I saw that. He was on.
He's done a few of those.
Sean Hannity, I think, was one of the guys.
Yeah, Sean Hannity, yeah. And Bill O'Reilly and Sean Hannity have both refused to have him on their show, which is just a tacit admission that, oh, you are right. I don't want to have to face, like, debating you.
Well, that's the thing. We have very little ground for debate in this country or in this society or in this political system or whatever you want to put it in. He could go on Sean Hannity's show and he'll get a split screen with somebody and they'll give him, 10 seconds and they'll cut him down, they'll eat him up and they'll talk louder than him. And you're giving no ground for genuine, actual change. It's like...
That's not supposed to provide change, though. That's really supposed...
Well, it's a rating. That's television. All television is entertainment, in my opinion. And all television is based on ratings. But...
Yeah. Well, advertising revenue is better when there are more people watching and since we're all driven by profit. I think that's the change that needs to happen. I think we need to... An ideological shift needs to happen where we stop worshipping money. Because money, the worship of money and the idea that money is super important is what's resulting in all of these problems, really. And on the Joe Rogan podcast, the Joe Rogan Experience, I remember him saying, he put it in a really funny way. He was talking about somebody who has like billions of dollars. And he was like, $1 billion is a crazy amount. If you knew someone who had 1 billion shoes, you'd be like, why do you have 1 billion shoes? That's too many. You don't collect 1 billion of something unless they're crazy.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's true. Like, you don't need... Like, the American economy, isn't it like something like $14 trillion?
Yeah, none of it's real.
$1 trillion is 1,000 billion. It's mental.
It's none of it's real.
It's made up,
It's the first time in history, really, I suppose, over the past however many years, that economy hasn't had a grounding in anything. It used to be based on the gold standard, how much gold a country had.
Yeah.
It used to be based on the actual something, whereas now it's based on forecasts and economic predictions.
Yeah.
And these things aren't real. These things don't exist. And so all the money doesn't exist. It's sort of like 10% of actual money is money, if that makes sense. Money is actual money. It's like real money.
I think all money is symbolic. All money is symbolic of gratitude and debt, really. Like, money fundamentally is a symbol. And the fact that we don't recognise that in our culture, and that even saying that is likely to get people to turn their heads and raise an eyebrow, is what the problem is. We believe in money to such a degree that we think we can't live without it, and we worship it, and we need it, and we need to profit. And yeah, you're going to have a hard time if you don't have any money, obviously, but I don't know. I mean, your life isn't going to get that much better if you start making millions. It really isn't.
Well,
all of these rich people, they don't look particularly happy. They look stressed. They look really dour, and they're a slave to their idol, which is money.
And that's one of the things I saw Russell Brand talk about quite recently, is the fact that he, as a youngster, and after... he had battled heroin addiction, I think, for a while. His whole thing was, I'm gonna make something of myself. I'm gonna be famous and have money and be able to get all the things I want. And he got those and realised that they didn't solve the core fundamental problems he had wrong with him that led to his heroin addiction and his sexual addiction and all these things.
Yeah, yeah.
and that's something that people don't see. Like, I can sit here and say, oh yeah, I can understand that having, £1 billion isn't going to solve all the problems that I think it is. But there's still quite a big part of me that goes, well, it would be a lot easier if I had £1 billion. But all it would, it will get rid of all the materialistic problems that I have. Like, I could afford other things. But the core problems that I have with myself...
Like spiritual problems can't be solved.
That I'm aware of to a certain extent. I can sit here and I can list things that I probably think have made me the way I am today, both positively and negatively. But I can't be 100% sure of them.
No.
And people put money and fame and, they think that will equal happiness, and I don't think it does. I don't think it will.
I agree. I mean, we don't, in our culture now, we don't have any religion, we don't have any spirituality, we don't have any mythology. And all that stuff has been replaced by these mythologies and religions that have sort of crept up that we don't think of as religions. Capitalism, exactly. Capitalism is an ideology. And just like any ideology, like people always go on about how Islam is evil. And one of the big points they bring out when people talk about how bad Islam is that people kill in the name of Islam, and if you leave Islam, you're ostracized. But that can be said of capitalism. People kill in the name of capitalism more than any other ideology. And if you leave capitalism, you'll be ostracised. If I said now, I'm abandoning money, I'm abandoning all material possessions, people, A, would ostracise me in a social way, but B, I wouldn't be allowed to do half of the things in this society. I wouldn't have, like, an identity. I wouldn't, if I said, excuse me, I don't want a national insurance number, that's not allowed. I'm not allowed.
Get a job without a national insurance number.
Yeah.
And that's interesting as well when you think that people blame religion for a lot of conflicts that are going on in the world. But are they merely using religion as a tool to deflect blame? I would say yes, definitely. Because are wars based on religion anymore? No, this isn't the Crusades. We could say, oh, look at these, dirty Muslims doing this, that and the other. But, we've gone over there and we're trying to basically steal their oil because it's worth a lot of money to us and it'll make us richer and we won't have to pay them. And it all comes from that. If you bring it back and back and back, or you can say it all comes from that. I don't know.
I mean, yeah, I agree to an extent. I think that when people say that religion causes all war, that's a really narrow way to look at it. But I think fundamentally, a better idea would be to say that any ideology which you don't realise is an ideology is likely to make you violent. Like the fact that most of us don't realise that we're living within a religion and a mythology which is based around money. Like we're told stories every day that are supposed to change the way we act. We don't call them stories, though. We call them adverts, commercials,
Yeah.
And they're supposed to hypnotise us into thinking that it's our idea to buy the new Samsung Galaxy Note or whatever because there's an advert that says fun, happiness, family, togetherness, and then there's a picture of the note. And it's like we need to recognise the fact that we are in an ideology and that it's not a good one.
It doesn't bring happiness at all.
No, because otherwise we'll just keep killing in the name of this.
Killing in the name of...
I wrote that,
Really? It's a great song.
Thank you. Thanks. I didn't write the lyrics.
You just wrote the
drum beat after listening to it.
It's something I've been thinking of, well, not thinking of, but thinking about quite a lot recently. About, like, not happiness as such, but myself. I've been quite self-reflective.
Yeah, it's good to be. Very good to be.
About, who I am, why I am, who I am, etc. And it's something I feel I want to delve deeper into. I've said this to you personally before, whether it's, therapy or drugs or this or that. I feel like it's something that could be very, very interesting to delve into, and I think it could make me a much better person, but there's something that's stopping me from doing that. And
I think that what stops all of us from doing it is fear, really. It's a scary prospect.
I have moments of sort of like, right, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna go and see this or take this or do this, and I want to, peel away another layer of the onion. And I can write down reasons why I think X, Y, and Z. But I don't know, and I don't know if I'll ever know. And I think that's interesting. Like I was thinking about this with martial arts recently. I feel like it's something myself, again, to say like my being is quite a pretentious thing to say, but something that I've really been missing, because it sort of gives a sort of discipline and a routine and something that I had throughout my entire life up until a certain point. And now I can feel it's missing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I took that away and said if I never did that, some of the principles, and not that I live by or whatever, but some of the things that have defined what I am and why I am wouldn't be in place. Like I used that discipline there that maybe I was missing from elsewhere. Daddy issues, but and I feel now that's gone. And it's interesting. What do you replace that with? I don't know. It's just it's interesting. I find it interesting more than scary at this thought. But I think making that step is like you say, is the fearful side of it. That sort of, what am I gonna uncover here? I don't know.
Yeah. As you know, I've been reading a lot about mythology, and I'm really into mythology. And at the start of almost every mythological story that's about spiritualism, there's always some sort of character that gives the hero the opportunity to go on the adventure. And the hero can either take the opportunity by facing their fear, or they can run away from it. And when they run away from it, more often than not, something that happens to them, like they turn to stone. Like, for example, if you stare into the eyes of Medusa, in other words, if you follow your fear, you turn to stone, and that's what we call arrested development, or like, you know, not progressing. And I think it's important to, when an opportunity presents itself, when the snake presents itself and says, eat from the tree, or whatever it happens to be, I think you should always follow your, well, not follow, you shouldn't follow your fear, you should conquer your fear. Because that, really, we're being presented with fight or flight. And I think that when it's something spiritual, you can't run away, flight is not an option, because you can't run away from something that's in your own mind. You have to fight, and otherwise, you know, you'll just stagnate. We're missing this. We're missing all these mythologies that tell us this. We're missing spirituality from our lives, so we've got to sort of try and get it ourselves, and it's so difficult to get it yourself. So we've got a culture full of people who are addicted to Vicodin and, you know, TV and sugar and all sorts of things that just, you know, people have turned to stone, and people don't want to face this lack of spirituality and this lack of meaning in life.
I don't know if it's scary. I say it's scary, sort of, that's my natural instinct to say, but I don't think I actually believe that. I think it's exciting.
Yeah, well, that's good then. I think you're quite a fearless person. That's probably in part due to the fact that you've done martial arts for so long. So you've had to put up with some degree of trauma. In your case, it was like physical trauma that was sort of meant to be there because it's under the thing of martial arts, and it's like, you know, it's regimented, and that's a good thing, I think.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, I think so.
People who've had some kind of trauma or some kind of, I wouldn't say fucked up, because I don't necessarily mean fucked up, but a non 2.4 children background, I feel they're often the most interesting people to talk to.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for a lot of people who face trauma, it awakens them, and a lot of people who face trauma, it fucks them up for their entire life, you know.
Yeah.
Like, this is the idea of the snake that presents itself and gives you the opportunity to either fight or run away. Like, you can see that in a lot of people. You can see in a lot of people that you have faced something in your past and you fought it, or you faced something in your past and you ran away from it. It's a really visible thing in people's personalities.
We're great. We're just great people. I'm just an all-round great bloke. I think that's the trouble.
That's the problem, isn't it? We're too good.
I'm just well good, and I haven't got an ego at all. That's my problem. Is that I've just got my problem. I've just got zero ego. I'm just like the most down-to-earth, normal, everyday, cool, sexy, modest, handsome.
I actually never talk in the first person because I have no ego.
No ego at all. Yeah. Sam's ego.